morning, everyone. Welcome to Kohler's Experience Centre here in London. I'm Ben Thomas, Assistant Editor at Sleeper Media. For those of you who don't know who we are already, we have 3 magazine titles. We have Sleeper, which focuses on hotel design, which you'll see here. We have Supper, which looks at F&B in hotels, and we have Starboard, which covers mobile hospitality projects. So we do have a few copies of our latest Sleeper here tonight, and my colleagues Rob and Charlotte can talk you through the projects that we've covered, if you want to learn a bit more about what we do. So we're here tonight to talk about how the hotel bathroom is evolving, delving into what today's traveller is looking for and where the opportunities lie for future innovation. Kohler will also be providing insight on how it's responding through the design of its new collections. So we're going to be keeping things quite interactive. If you guys have got any questions during the session, feel free to kind of raise your hand and we'll get a microphone over to you. So joining me on stage, we've got 3 of the people, I guess, at the forefront of hospitality and product design. We have Charlie North from Ennismore, John Paul Pedersen from Wimberley Interiors, and we have Richard Clough from Kohler's in-house design team. So I'm going to ask you guys to introduce yourselves in full, tell us a bit about your sort of roles, what you do at your respective companies. So we'll start with Richard, and then we'll work our way down.
Thanks, Ben. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Hopefully we dodged the rain, which is the main thing right today. So hi, I'm Rich Clough. So I head up the design team for Kohler in the UK, based out of Cheltenham, but obviously Kohler is a global business, headquartered in the US in Wisconsin, and we work across a number of different projects, particularly in high-end hospitality, high-end retail, and then also mass retail as well to a point, really around the kind of showering faucet side, really. So my job is to head up the industrial design elements of those projects, really. So I work very closely with our teams in the US, our teams in China and India to really understand what the details are that those particular clients and those customers are looking for.
I'm Charlie. I'm VP of Interior Design for Ennismore. So I cover globally 3 brands, which is the Hoxton Hotel, Working From, which is our co-working brand, and Gleneagles Hotel, which is up in Scotland. I have, at the same time, I run an interior design studio called AIM Studios, and we have a team of about 20 designers. And the idea is that we can service any of the Ennismore brands, but we focus really on the 3 brands that I'm responsible for.
Hi, I'm John Paul Peterson with Wimberley Interiors. So I'm Director of Design here in our London studio. And we're the interior studio of WATG, architecture firm. And I, along with some of my colleagues, run the studio for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. That's kind of our region.
Perfect. Richard, you've got some slides that you'd like to discuss, so I'll pass over to you and then we'll jump into the conversation.
Brilliant, perfect. Yeah, because I want to be able to get on to Charlie and John Paul and allow them to expand on their roles. But we've got a few slides really to kind of give a bit of background really on some of the focal points of how in the design team, the global design team, some of the projects that we focused on and how we approach them really. So the first real comment to talk about is obviously we're here to talk about experiential design really, and how that has changed and moved over the years and how it's changed over the last 5, 10, 15 years really. So hopefully there's a few questions that come around that area particularly. But I thought the best thing to do is to talk really around 3 projects, and particularly to show how, in this case, how technology is becoming more and more integrated into certain projects that we're looking at. So the first is our statement and anthem range. Next slide. And really the focus for this project is around delivering intuitive controls and intuitive interactions really. So this is a digital range. It's a range of fittings which you'll see over there. So the shower fittings that we have, and then the anthem is the digital interface and the back-end digital valve that we produce as well. So really for hospitality is about trying to understand how consumers and how customers and how visitors of those environments can walk into an environment having probably never seen a product of this type before and be able to understand how to use it straight away. Next slide, please. And really it's around delivering delightful experiences. So it's around how do we deliver water in a different way. So a number of our fittings, and hopefully after the talk you get a chance to take a look at them, is around how we deliver water in a kinetic way through movement, and particularly how we inject air into that water. So which is a sustainable element. So we use probably about 70% air in our delivery of our water. And it's allowing us to deliver more impactful, more powerful spray experiences to our customers. Really. Next slide, please. And then again, looking at the design of the interface, the kind of physical interface, and then also the graphical user interface, is really about trying to use those haptics and those triggers that customers and consumers and people understand. So there's a large dial because you understand everyone understands how to rotate a dial, and the buttons are very obvious and very, very intuitive. So the idea that you should know how to turn the product on and off when you enter a hotel space, for example. Excellent. And then again, looking at how we elevate that experience and elevate those projects through the use of materials. So we look at colour material finish, and we look at how we deliver different materials for different bespoke areas and different bespoke needs. So we can offer a full spectrum of products in a particular suite of fittings. Next slide, please. The next one you'll see is the stillness bath, really. So this is more about, again, it's more integrated in the technology and bringing technology more to the forefront. So this is about trying to create this idea of escapism and really trying to find a focal point for a high-end hotel room. And it's around, we've all hopefully all been in infinity pools, and you've kind of laid there and enjoyed that view out over the ocean. This is what this bath is trying to replicate. So the idea of this stillness, this calmness, this kind of experiential piece. And then, next slide, please. If we integrate the tower, so the stillness tower, and that delivers a fog, effectively. So we've got a number of different bits of technology that are starting to creep into the product, where you're delivering fog and around experience, and then we're starting to deliver scent. So next slide, please. We have different scent capsules. So the idea that the consumer and the user in those particular environments can tailor it to what they want, so it feels very bespoke to them. And the final project is really overt in terms of its technological advancement. So it's trying to take a fairly traditional product, a toilet in this case, and how do you integrate technology in a meaningful way. So this is our NUMI 2 toilet. Next slide, please. And what we're looking at here is how can we create light and use light in a different way. So the toilet light will change depending on the day. So it uses the circadian rhythm of people to understand the time of the day and what the types of light that you need, really. So there's a lot of research has gone into how our bodies react to light and also to water, and we're linking those together, really. Whether you want to spend 15 minutes on the toilet or whether you want to spend 2 minutes on the toilet, it's your choice, to be honest. So again, it's just trying to show how we're looking at technology, but we're trying to use technology in a meaningful way, really, moving forward.
Perfect. Well, we'll throw it over to John Paul and Charlie. John Paul, you've been at Wimberley for just over a decade now.
Yes.
Can you talk us through some of the changes that you've seen in the sort of bathroom space and the sort of drivers behind that change?
From a design perspective, I mean, we all, there's a lot of designers here, so I'm sure we can all appreciate that like the evolution of bathroom design has really turned more kind of towards wellness. So I think there's, at least what we're seeing, is there's a much more of a focus on purity of materials, on the details of materials, and really bringing, as Charlie was saying, this experiential, Rich, was saying that bringing in this experiential, tranquil quality to the bathroom design, really less so much about, 10 different stones or in a space, but really focused on these kind of bigger gestures. That's kind of how we're seeing it develop.
Yeah. And Charlie, how have you seen things since you've been at Ennismore? Obviously, things have developed since then.
Yeah, I think we've done the refurbishment of Glen Eagles over the last 5 or 6 years, which has been quite interesting. And that Glen Eagles is a brand that it stays quite traditional. It doesn't really focus on the high-tech element of the bathroom design. So I think there's lots of opportunity there that we haven't yet explored, but some of our other brands will be sort of exploring that in due course. But we've sort of stuck to the more traditional elements of design. So I'm kind of excited to see what happens next over the next few years.
And we touched on fixtures and fittings, and is that something that guests are kind of demanding now? They want that. We were talking earlier about that kind of spa-like experience in the personal wellness space rather than the kind of spa within the hotel.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can see there's a definite shift that people, consumers, we're all consumers at the end of the day. Our expectation levels have been heightened because we've got more access to social media, we can see more things, we can almost travel to places without traveling to places now. I mean, technically you can do that in the metaverse if we need to. Let's not get started on that. That's a separate conversation, all right? But it's that level of experience and that expectation of experience is elevated both in the home, but also now when you start to move away. It's like, right, well, how do you elevate it again when you go to a high-end luxury establishment? You know, what do people have at their home that they can't, that they want here, really? So it's how do we take that? And it might be around technology. It might be, like Charlie said, it's more about a kind of passive technology, and it's more about allowing people to relax and unwind.
And obviously,
So also, to your point earlier about sustainability and how the technology is helping drive sustainability. I had no idea that 70% of what comes out of your shower heads is air, so that's kind of interesting. I think that's going to drive the evolution of bathroom design.
we'll talk about sustainability for a minute. Is it something that's coming from guests? Are they kind of demanding that now, or is it coming from sort of owners? And maybe if you guys want to jump in first and discuss that.
You can take it.
From my perspective, it comes from brand. So it comes from what we want to achieve as a brand. Like the Hoxton is one of my brands, and it's important that moving forward that we are driving sustainability. Ennismore as a whole has a whole approach to sustainability that we're all being encouraged to sort of take on, and I think it's definitely something that it will impact everyone. And the sooner we do it, the better. And when there's products that are being designed that will help with that, it becomes an expectation. So brands can push it, consumers want it, and owners want it too, because it makes their buildings more efficient and brings the energy costs down. So it really helps everyone.
Well, just to add to that, I think at least what we're seeing is, as you all know, it's social responsibility. It's part of all of our kind of, we don't have a choice. We have to look at sustainability and how that comes into play. It's not just, recycled materials, but it's really looking at, at least for us, local materials. So, things that are local in the place that the project is, for us, is a huge kind of asset when you look at transport and all of those things. So it's our responsibility, it's everyone's.
And I guess from Kohler's point of view, that's always been kind of part of the philosophy, has it? And so obviously you guys deliver water, so it's become part of...
Yeah, traditionally, a lot of people have talked about sustainability, but it's definitely shifted, and there's great to hear John Paul talk about responsibility. It's, as a brand like Kohler, we have a responsibility to deliver products that we feel are more sustainable and more responsible about their approach. And it's no longer just about the water. It's about that whole piece of where are we sourcing, how are we sourcing, and really I had a really interesting talk about this idea of regenerative sourcing. Okay. So it's not about going to a place and saying, well, we can stick a factory there and we can give you all jobs. It's about how do you allow that area to then grow itself. Okay. So it's no longer just about the product anymore. It's much bigger than that. Yeah.
So let's skip back to talk about the kind of layout and the design of the bathroom space. Obviously, bathrooms and bedrooms have kind of merged a little bit. And I guess the bathroom has kind of borrowed space from the guest room in some sort of instances. How, for you guys, is it a challenge to find solutions that kind of break up the guest room space, but also keep that kind of fluid experience? Have you found sliding panels and sort of glass doors and all that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because we've gone into a whole host of hotels where they were built in the 90s or the early 2000s, and they've got glass walls between the bathroom and the bedroom. And there seemed to be this whole movement of lack of privacy. Yeah. It's just accepted that if you were staying in a hotel room that you didn't need privacy. And I feel like now, I might be wrong, but my feeling is that people are moving towards wanting the privacy and that sort of sanctuary that you can create for yourself. Yeah. And the idea of not being exposed to anything outside of your bathroom. So we've taken these glass partitions out when we've refurbished rooms and turned them into Hoxtons. And I think that's quite important to get that privacy back. And at the same time, it's always nice to have a bathtub in your bedroom. I don't know how many people really use that, but I started doing that a few years ago, and actually it's a game changer. You can watch TV while you're in the bath.
John Paul, how have you seen that from sort of the luxury operation side in terms of working with operators? Are they asking for more private spaces, or has there been a...
it depends on the region as well. Working in Middle East versus working in China, there are different kind of trends that we see, and culturally what's kind of more appropriate. But yeah, as Charlie was saying, there was that trend towards like opening the bathroom up, and now it seems to be closing. But the bathroom's certainly getting larger, And we're seeing kind of a decompartmentalization of the bathroom in a sense that, it is like about a more big open shower as part, the bathtub is key, the vanity, that vignette when you walk in, what do you see? It's becoming much more impactful than perhaps some moments in the room, because it's where you're standing under that beautiful Kohler rain shower that is, you have that moment.
Yeah. And we talked earlier about kind of inviting people into your own space via like Zoom and video calls and kind of the evolution of that and how that's affected the layout of spaces.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably less relevant for kind of hospitality, but definitely, we hopefully, fingers crossed, coming through the back end of COVID right now. The fact that we're all sat here is a good sign. But that idea that we've all kind of invited people into our homes through this kind of screen and through Zoom and Teams, that where is your sanctuary then? If the home was the sanctuary, right? Where is it now if you've got people people coming into your home virtually? It's tending to, in our view, moving to the bathroom.
Yeah.
So people are renovating their bathrooms, and what they're looking for now is very different to what they were looking for 10 years ago and 5 years ago. So it's definitely shifted.
And has that been reflected in materials? Obviously, we talked about materials before.
Yeah, I mean, you go back to sustainability. Really, there's a definite push. It's always been a push of the business to push materials. We have Waste Lab, for example, in Kohler, where we use recycled material to create tiles and things like that. And we've always been advocates of that, but more often than not now, our consumers are starting to ask for it. And as soon as you get that shift, where mainstream and consumers and high-end hospitality start asking for it, that's when it's quite easy to push it through.
And John Paul, you work with kind of the luxury operators, and you were talking about how they're, I guess, trying to become more like lifestyle brands. How has that impacted what they're asking for in terms of the design of bathroom spaces?
Well, I think, for us, it's really approaching it. It's the story, and what they're developing. Is it a resort? Is it an urban property? And all the brands, the luxury brands, are similar in the sense that they want to offer a residential approach to the design, through the use of honest materials, through the use of quality materials, and perhaps fewer materials, but really honest, like beautiful materials. And so I think it's that kind of compilation, that symphony of a few beautiful materials with a few beautiful products as well. Yeah. How that all kind of comes together to give that overall sense. Yeah.
And Charlie, what's your take on that? We were talking before about kind of the definition of luxury and lifestyle, and how do you see that from the operational perspective?
Yeah, I think the definition of a lifestyle hotel is interesting, and I think that it's anything that embraces the local community and encourages people to come into your hotel who aren't necessarily staying there. And it's also about brand collaborations with local companies. So you might find bathroom products that are manufactured locally, and I think bathroom products is actually a really interesting thing to touch on. There's a whole element of sustainability built into that as well. But yeah, I think there's a whole sort of collaboration piece, which is really interesting.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about how the bathroom space could become a space for collaboration, with different brands. Do you want to kind of elaborate on that and talk a bit about how you kind of see that becoming a...
Yeah, I think it's part of that sort of the bathroom becoming almost a spa as an extension of your guest room. I stayed at Hotel St. Cecilia in Austin, you'll probably know it, and they have in the bathrooms they have a cabinet of a mini bar of products that you can use from Santa Maria Novella, which is an Italian soap manufacturer. And so this has become a point of sale in the bathroom, and it's just an amazing thing, and it really can become a brand collaboration and like a sale point for if it's designed in an appropriate way that really suits the brand that you're going to sell. I think that whole sanctuary and spa piece is quite interesting.
Yeah, there's definitely a gap. Is that something that Kohler would potentially explore in terms of bespoke collaborations with hotel groups or hotel projects?
Yeah, so we do explore it. I think it's one of those, again, like Charlie's saying, it has to be the right partnership. It has to be, it can't be the kind of in vogue, if you like, let's go and partner with this particular company. It has to be right for both parties, but we do get a lot of that, and we do, particularly we talked a little bit about finishes and things like that, really. We get a lot of requests around specific finishes for specific hotels, really around trying to create that bespoke environment. So it feels like although the product is generally the same. The skeleton of the product is the same. The look and the feel of the product when it's in the hotel room is quite different to one which is in a different hotel. So it feels like it's a bespoke.
So it's quite a specific kind of collaboration. And we were talking before about collaborations with designers, obviously Louis O'Hara, people like that. How is there a set of considerations that you take when you're kind of working with people, or does it just depend on?
Again, it depends on the focus. Depends on the focus for the projects that we're looking at, and it depends on the message that we're trying to share, really. So if you look back at Milan, we partnered with Daniel Larsham, and we did a whole partnership and a whole kind of experiential piece with Daniel Larsham there in Milan, and that's part of a range that he's developing. So we don't partner with a lot of almost individual designers or individual brands, but we partner with what we feel are the right ones.
Yeah. And I guess the same with you, Charlie, in terms of working with external designers and with Ennismore. Is it quite a select process in terms of who you work with? Does it depend on?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the brand, actually.
Yeah.
We choose designers that are appropriate for the brand. I think you find certain designers that are great at guest rooms. You find designers that are great at F&B spaces. You find designers that are great at classical luxury, and other designers that are great at sort of the more mid-scale and budget hotels as well. So it's selecting the right people to work with is always really important.
And I guess it's the same, with you, John Paul, in terms of who you kind of work with. Is there any particular brands that are really pushing for certain things in a bathroom, or does it depend, like you say, on the region? Does it depend on what they're asking for?
It depends on the region. We're working with a multitude of brands, kind of at all levels, more perhaps luxury brands, but your Four Seasons, your Ritz-Carltons, they all kind of ultimately want the same thing. But what we're excited to see is that, you touched on the products, and is that there's obviously a shift away from, the little bottles that we all love grabbing off the housekeeping carts.
The ones you can never open.
That's all going away, which is really, a step in the right direction. But then it's our challenge to design kind of around these sustainable bottles that are refilled, and so it's those details that are very much kind of part of what.
So it's the kind of details that differentiate the different.
Absolutely, the brands. So
let's talk a little bit about social media, the impact of social media on bathroom design and designers as a wider entity. Obviously, people now see an aesthetic. We live in a society where that's often judged first. In a bathroom, functionality is a huge thing. How much of a challenge is it for you guys as designers to kind of strike the sweet spot between aesthetic and functionality? I'll let Charlie take that one.
I think it depends on the
Very good.
it depends on the brand, and it depends on your opportunity. Like, if you're building a 200-bedroom hotel with 3 square meter bathrooms without any windows, it's quite difficult. I think if you've got the luxury of working on a project where you've got natural light, which is obviously going to help with photography and everything. If you've got an outdoor element of it, it's even better. My wife and I we try and stay in as many hotels as possible. We've stayed in cabins in the middle of nowhere in the UK where you don't have a bathroom. You've got a bag that you heat up your water on the fire, then you put the hot water in, you hang it on a tree and you turn a valve and you're outside. And then we stayed in places where there's a hotel called Palm in Sri Lanka, which is incredible. And it's like there's all these A-frames. Half of your bathroom is inside in the air conditioning, and then you step outside into your private sanctuary, which has just got a big rain shower in the middle, and you're just stood outside having a shower. And I think if you get the opportunity to work on projects with outside bathrooms or big bathrooms with natural light, then I think it's a winner. Everyone wants to Instagram them.
Yeah, how have you seen that, John Paul, in terms of outdoor bathrooms? Is that something that obviously depends on the location and different factors, but are like luxury operators, if they have the capacity for it, they're asking for that kind of outdoor bathroom space experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're doing quite a bit of work in Greece, and you're seeing, in the Mediterranean as well, that outdoor bathrooms are perhaps even more important than the indoor part of the bathroom. So, it's looking and working with Kohler and brands, the actual fittings to be suitable for the exterior, but designing it in collaboration with the landscape designer, so it's much more of an interactive kind of really special experience that's outdoor.
Yeah, and Richard, have you seen that in terms of projects that you've worked on? Have you worked on outdoor bathrooms? And
we've worked on a few. It's not a huge focus for us right now.
Okay.
I think the the kind of focal point really for us is around that kind of in-room hospitality piece really at the moment. But it's definitely a trend which is shifting.
Yeah.
Probably not in the UK so much because I don't think you want to shower outside. But definitely in the warmer climates, it's definitely the types of questions we're being asked is, can these products be designed to work outside? So it's, without giving too much away, it's definitely things that we're looking into.
Yeah, and is functionality kind of, for you guys, top of the list? Is that always kind of obviously it's got to be intuitive, but it's also
great. We talk a lot about gracious experiences. That's really what we try to express in our product really. And really that's about everything through from what the product looks and feels like, and when you walk over to it and you see the product, but also then how you interact with it. So whether it's a shower, or it's a digital user interface, or it's a basin, or it's a faucet, or it could be quite literally anything. We always start with that idea of who's going to use this product and how are we going to design for that user. And that really, in all honesty, tends to drive us in the right direction, hopefully, from the products that you can see around us. Hopefully you agree.
Does anyone have any questions whilst we've... No? Silence. Okay, in that case, we'll kind of move on and look ahead towards the future and potentially what sort of trends or what might drive things going forward. Do you feel like it's tech that's going to drive things, or that kind of harmony between tech and aesthetic?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I think it's definitely that. It's not tech. There's a very fine line between driving tech and tech trying to find a home. And we're very conscious of that at Kohler, that we don't want to drive technology. Okay, you've seen a kind of very technology advanced toilet. That's almost a kind of halo project. We want to do tech in a way that is right and meaningful for the consumer and for the user. If it's not meaningful and it doesn't offer a benefit, then it shouldn't be there. Yes. I think the other piece as well is the technology pieces. When you look at things like digital, it's very easy to see it. The digital showers we do, the Anthem controls, it's very obvious what that technology is. We explore a lot of back-end technologies around how we're sourcing materials and how we're using materials and which new materials should be looking at, which are, let's call them technologically advanced. So there's that side of the technology that a mainstream consumer or someone who stays in a luxury establishment will not see, but it has led to that product range that we've delivered. Yeah.
And you talked earlier about some of the sort of more advanced technological pieces that are almost having a classic finish put on them by kind of luxury hotel owners and operators.
Yeah,
talk us through that.
It's definitely. I mean, it's a shift. It's not one I'd realised really until recently. Is the idea of taking a traditional finish, if you like, almost a kind of burnished finish, if you like, and placing it on a fairly modern product. We've tended to do suites and collections which are almost a modern take on a traditional aesthetic, where we've looked at the materials and the best material for that, and they're often, again, sort of modern versions of burnished finishes and things. But there's been a shift, and there's been a number of requests that have come in that people want that finish on a kind of very modern looking product, which is quite a shift that we're looking into.
And John Paul, would you agree in terms of looking ahead? Do you think it'll be that kind of harmony between aesthetic, technology, intuitiveness?
Yeah, from a design perspective, less is more for us in terms of technology. As few plates as possible. I think it definitely depends on the brand. But the finish range, what Rich was talking about is, for sure, all the designers here are very happy to see all the beautiful finishes that are being developed. It does come down to cost, of course, as well. But to have not all polished chrome everywhere is beautiful, and even just the scale of the pieces is also changing. You can see things look chunkier and more luxurious, and I think that there's a shift perhaps towards that a bit more rich feel in terms of kind of the selections.
And talk us through, is there any sort of new materials that you've kind of discovered over the past kind of few years, or you think there's potentially scope to use them in the bathroom that potentially haven't been used before? Or
there's a lot of new materials. I can't say too much about some of the new materials that we're looking at, because I don't want to give too much IP away, to be honest, and a lot of it's confidential. But we are exploring. I mean, we're obviously exploring the traditional things that everyone's aware of around 3D printing, and traditionally 3D printing was around 3D printing plastic. We're now exploring 3D printing of metals and things like that, really. And then how there's a movement, and there's a movement away from chrome, but chrome is still a big part of our range, but it's not a particularly sustainable material to use. So we're looking at more sustainable options of chrome and how we can give that chrome look and feel without it having the kind of negative connotations of a traditional chrome finish.
And I guess looking ahead, I don't want to put you guys on the spot, but if I was to kind of ask where you see the hotel bathroom in, let's say, 5-10 years' time, is there any specific kind of standout elements that you think will be included, or does it depend on the project?
A bathroom won't be a bathroom, I guess. I don't know.
Do you think the days of these kind of functional, uninspiring spaces are gone? Do you think the guest is kind of demanding as part of, I guess, the narrative of the hotel?
I think,
The
yeah, I
bathroom
think
being
that's
part
our
of that.
challenge. I mean, as designers, architects and designers, that's the challenge, is to kind of take that forward, the concept, the notion of a bathroom as we see it, and working with, the teams that supply the material, what that will be. I'm not sure I know, actually. We have to come up with it.
I think also I feel like a lot of this conversation might have been based around maybe more like luxury end, with the high-tech products as well. There's always going to be hotels, and there is within Ennismore's range, that are sort of more budget-focused and based on functionality. And I think that you're always going to have a demand for very simple, straightforward bathrooms that are 2.5 square meters. But it will be interesting to see how much of that tech becomes affordable, that can sort of simplify.
Kind of filter down to the mass market.
Yeah, and also because then that will impact like cleaning times in hotel rooms, because you might have smart materials that are like self-cleaning and monitors that gauge dirt, and I don't know, all sorts of things. There's probably going to be a big drive towards that.
I'd add to that also. I think we're seeing definitely experiential, resort travel as business. Perhaps fewer business people are traveling. Business hotels kind of perhaps not as on the focus. Is definitely that. We talked about outdoor showers, outdoor bathrooms, more of that experiential, really bringing the bathroom outside. Natural light, as much natural light as possible. I think that will continue to kind of trend. For sure.
And I saw you nodding your head. Do you agree with those points?
Couldn't agree more. I hope we don't end up in the metaverse of hotels, to be honest, because that would be a disaster if we're all just sat in our own rooms in an imaginary hotel room. But yeah, I think it's good to hear Charlie talk about that. It's not just the high-end piece. There is the let's call it more mainstream hotels as well. In Kohler we have that full spectrum where we have to focus on kind of mass retail at one end and high-end luxury at the other end, and our products have to span that really. So it's around, for me, I think the future of particularly the high-end luxury hotel room is more about how you're potentially manipulating that space. So it's less about that kind of, there's a product here, there's a product here, there's a product here. It's almost you walk in and there's a kind of theatrical element, and there's some way of that space can morph over time or change over time. I don't know how we do that right now, but I think there's definitely something in that. And I think that's when you start integrating that, what we call kind of passive tech and things like that. Google are very good at it. They do it very well, so you don't know it's there.
So it has to be there, but kind of in the background almost.
Exactly.
Does anyone have any questions?
In terms of, it might be slightly scary, but the kind of AI implications of, water restriction, of already limiting the amount of output that's coming out of appliances, but then if there's a kind of time regulation, I know it kind of maybe slightly sinister, but that might be something that might need to be addressed in a kind of holistic way, as you mentioned about projects out in the Middle East where there's like water limitations anyway. So not just putting all the onus on the manufacturer or the end user, but trying to use AI and digitization in a kind of intelligent, humane way.
Yeah. Let's touch on AI in terms of, from a product perspective. Is that something that you guys are exploring in terms of?
Yeah, I mean it's huge. Just artificial intelligence and machine learning is not a new thing. Our products that we develop, the Anthem valve, for example, less so about the Anthem control, but the Anthem valve, the kind of the back end brain, if you like, is very smart. It does a lot of those things. It measures water flow, it feeds that back. But again, it's very much on the user and the consumer to look at their water use and decide to make a conscious decision to be more responsible about the next time they step in the shower. It's how does that become just a natural part of their life, really.
And it's like an educational process.
It's an educational piece, and it's the I think we are living in a time when people are more conscious and responsibly aware of the decisions that we're making and the products that we're buying. And you can see it with other brands, you can see it with Nike and people like that. They are sourcing their products more responsibly and manufacturing their products more responsibly. It's no longer going to be a choice. It'll just be, we have to do that.
Yeah, and the transparency, I guess, across the products, interior design operators, that's going to be sort of huge going forward as well. Do we have any final questions for the panel? Something there.
It's an interesting point you bring up about the AI. I'm just trying to work out, like you mentioned, Kohler mentioned that there were some things that you couldn't discuss. So they're the things I'm really interested in. But do you think there's any research being done for the future of voice control? Like walking into a bathroom saying, right, okay, I'll switch the shower on, I want it medium hot, you know, that sort of thing. Has there been any research done on that?
There is, and I mean, that functionality is available now, to be honest. It's, you know, we can deliver that. That's not limited functionality, but it's fairly straightforward functionality. The voice control, a shower is not difficult, particularly with digital products. Okay, with traditional mechanical products, it's a bit more difficult, but with digital valving and things, it's pretty straightforward. Everything's connected and Wi-Fi enabled and Bluetooth enabled. The piece that it's the next level on, which I think you're alluding to, is how does it learn? How does the product learn from my use? And you're kind of seeing it with some products already in the market, you know, Hive and people like that are already doing that. They're used, you know, when are you turning your temperature up and when are you turning it down? Okay, I can learn, so you don't have to do it. We're exploring that as part of our showering ranges and our future showering collections, really, about how do we deliver products that learn with users. And, you know, does it learn that you've been to the gym a particular time of the day and you always have a cold shower because you like the Wim Hof treatment? So it knows to do that. So it's definitely coming. Definitely coming.
I think that's really interesting how it relates to disabilities as well, because voice control is obviously going to be really good for people with limited mobility. On the flip side, my father had motor neurones disease, and within 6 months of being diagnosed, he couldn't talk. So you always have to have a backup and another way of using these tools. But it could be a really interesting thing for accessible bathrooms to be able to be fully voice controlled for the right customer.
A lot more sort of personalised depending on the customer. I guess that's the challenge, isn't it? With hotel rooms, there's different customers coming through the door sort of every day.
Yeah, so you can't personalise
it
because
so
you're really
I
stuck
guess
with someone else's settings.
Yeah, how much of a challenge will that be for you guys in terms of design if, you know, operators are asking for more personalisation, but obviously there's only a certain point you can go to. How do you see that, John Paul, in terms of design-wise? Do you think there'll be more sort of leaning towards personalisation, or obviously?
Well, if it's as you said, personalization, you don't know who's coming through the door next. But I think it's perhaps a simplicity, you know, just in the design, a flexibility in the design that it can kind of adapt over time as trends change or as things kind of evolve. Yeah.
So I guess
the
adaptability.
Adaptability rather than personalisation.
Yeah, I think for us, from a Kohler perspective, it's that spectrum piece. It's how do you've almost got the ability to personalise more in your own environment, your own home. Yeah. You can be a lot more personal and you can define exactly what you want. When you go to a hotel room, you can't, because you can't walk in and have someone's freezing cold shower on you every time. But it's more about working with brands and hotel brands to understand, right, okay, what's their brand language, what's their brand DNA, and how do we deliver that, and what kind of experiences do they want?
Yeah. So I guess the last question for you, has anyone else got a question?
Yeah, I do. Actually, I suppose it's around, I mean, I know we're talking about hotel and hospitality, and therefore there is that sort of level of personalisation, but when does what we talk about in terms of hotel rooms and the beauty of products and all these things actually transcend the hotel room and become available to Joe Public, something that Joe Public can actually experience or buy off the shelf, and it's not the elitist product we sort of talk about in the context of this in the nicest possible way?
I could say that's probably directed at myself. Really, you've kind of hit the nail on the head of the challenge that we have as a design team. Really, as particularly with Kohler, we're not just high-end luxury product. We are mass retail as well. So the reality is, what we talked about earlier in the statement and anthem, you can buy that, you can put that in your house now. That's a product that you can buy, you can have it in your house, you can choose to purchase any of the fittings.
But when does it end up in Wix? Or, you know, I don't mean it quite like that, but what I mean is when does it become mass market? You know, when does something become something that is just normal?
Yeah, and the reality is that's why Kohler Co have a number of brands. That's why we work across a number of brands. So, you know, we have our Kohler brand, which is definitely positioned as that kind of mass level, well, the kind of high-end premium brand. We have Myra Showers, which you may have heard about, so we also have Myra Showers. That's when you'll see that almost kind of mass, in the UK particularly, that mass retail piece coming into the kind of Wix and B&Qs of the world. And then we have other brands around sort of Callista and Roburn, where it's more about cabinetry. So we try to stretch it. We try, and that allows us the ability to, while you still have that stretch and that spectrum for Kohler, you've still got boundaries that you can work to within. And then when you're looking at another particular area, you've got another brand that you might use. Does that answer your question? Yeah, cool.
We have another question down here at the front.
So my question is around upcycling and recycling. I think lately we've seen the advent of upcycling and recycling in interiors, especially for hotel design. How do you see this in the bathroom space? Because I think it's a little bit harder maybe to upcycle or recycle. Like, do you kind of get what I mean?
Yeah, I think you can do it with finishes a lot more easily than you can do it with your product. So we use C plastics. There's a company called Smile Plastics that we use, which is like all C plastics that have been reconstituted, and we can make them into vanity units, and they look like almost like terrazzo. So you can use obviously tiles and all sorts of finishes that you can use upcycled, recycled materials. The product is probably harder. I don't know. I guess there's an element of recycling materiality.
Yeah, there is definitely. I think there's an element of using recycled materials, and whether it's the plastic or the metals, and then it's also the kind of the back end of what do you do with the product when it's finished. How do you reuse or change the product? The other piece really is around in manufacture. How do we use some of the waste material that's formed from that? So we have Waste Lab, for example, where we produce a range of tiles that come from the waste slip that we have in the manufacturing process. So we're trying to not throw away, to use everything we possibly can, really. And it's a journey that we're on, I think, in Kohler Co, but we're definitely heading in the right direction, I'd say.
And hopefully the prices will come down, because this is the other limiter for us as designers at the moment, is the cost of recycled materials. They are more expensive than non-recycled materials. So the more demand there is, the bigger the production, and then the cheaper they'll become. So hopefully over time that will be beneficial.
Yeah, I think there's also a case for designing for longevity. I guess it's difficult with hotels because they go through sort of a cycle of 5 years, and it must be a challenge for you guys. John Paul, I'll pass this one to you as a designer. Obviously, you're always looking ahead almost to what's going to be relevant in 5 years' time, and kind of trying to take a step forward with each project.
Absolutely. In a bathroom, you'd hope it could go longer than 5 years. Yeah. We would like to see, if you're building even a mid-scale or luxury hotel, it should be timeless enough to last longer than 5 years. You might change the furniture in the room, but that's where I think the timeless aspect definitely comes into play, and the simplicity, the beauty and the simplicity to really last that that span of time. It's definitely more sustainable in that sense.
Yeah, most of our hotels would have like a 5 to 6 year cycle on FF&E and like furniture and fabrics, but then a sort of 10 to 12 year on hard finishes.
And I guess that's a consideration.
Yeah.
From Kohler's perspective is to design for that.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's definitely the kind of 10 to 12 years when we see the kind of hard product, the kind of hardware really piece, and it's broadly in line with residential as well. Like, people tend to redo their bathrooms and their kitchens, particularly around every 10 years. So we have to be thinking about that when we're designing products. We want to design products that last. We design quality product that should last, so you shouldn't feel like you need to do that. And it's often, and it was a little bit back to the kind of maybe where the future of the bathroom space goes for hospitality is, how does your space morph and grow so you're not kind of ripping everything out and replacing it with something new, that it almost kind of with time changes really, and it's a little bit what John Paul. Yeah.
Does anyone have any last questions? So I've got a question for you guys just to kind of round things out. I guess if you could close your eyes and envision your perfect hotel bathroom, what are the key sort of elements that you're looking for? Does it depend on the trip you're going on? Let's just say it's kind of a wide mark. Kind of, how would you see it if it was your perfect space? What would it include?
For me, a bathtub, a fireplace, big window, good view from the bath. Nothing too fancy. Just keep it cozy and warm and relaxing. I think it's about the sanctuary experience, the spa experience. If you can create that, and when you're on holiday or whatever, I think that's what I look for. And I think it was interesting talking to. Before I was in the hotel world, I was doing residential design, and talking to my client, a conversation that really stuck with me, that she had such a nice home that every time she went to stay at a hotel, it had to be better than what she had at home. Okay. So I think there's always this aspiration for when you stay somewhere that you don't want it to be worse than your own home. Otherwise, what's the point in spending money?
Yeah.
So I think that's just something that's really interesting. But the vision for me is natural light, cozy fireplace, bathtub. Great. Easy.
John Paul?
Oh,
I'll put you on the spot.
No. No, I think Charlie hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's for me, it would be really honest materials and natural light, just a pure natural space, and very, very comfortable, very residential.
For me, it's probably about escapism, really. So
okay.
my wife will hate me for saying this, but I've got 3 children, and often when I travel, it's for business, and it's nice to actually have that ability to kind of escape to and it is always tends to be in the hotel room, the bathroom that you look for. Really, it's around that. But again, it's like Charlie and John Paul said, it's that kind of relaxing environment.
Yeah.
Nothing too crazy, but I like the ability to be able to change things if I can.
Okay, so there's still.
I'm a bit techy. I kind of tend to, because naturally as a designer, I kind of pull things apart and try to understand what they're made. So I like having bits to play with in bathrooms. I think so. Yeah, something like that.
Great. Well, I think we've covered a broad range of topics there. Thanks to Kohler for inviting us to host the session, and thanks to the speakers, and thanks to you guys for attending. Thank you.